In the depths of space, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic dust, there exists a universal truth that has remained unchanged for millennia. Every species has its limit. Every warrior, no matter how elite, eventually breaks under enough pressure. The Galactic Council's most feared interrogation facility, known simply as the Crucible, had never failed to extract information from a prisoner. Not once in its 3,000-year history. Until a human arrived. What happened in those sterile white chambers over the course of 7 rotations would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about limits, endurance, and the terrifying resilience of humanity. 3 of the most elite guards in known space, beings whose very names struck fear into the hearts of criminals across star systems, would discover that sometimes the prey becomes the predator. This is the story of how one human didn't just survive the Crucible, he conquered it. Prepare yourself for a journey that will redefine what it means to be unbreakable. The transport vessel Judgment's edge drifted through the void like a metal predator stalking its prey. Inside its reinforced cargo bay, Marcus Chun sat perfectly still, his hands bound with quantum restraints that could hold a rampaging Krillian. The 3 guards assigned to watch him had expected screaming, begging, or at least the nervous fidgeting that accompanied most prisoners on their way to the Crucible. Instead, they got silence. Commander Zektar of the Velthani Empire adjusted his ceremonial armor and studied the human through 4 black eyes. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, with chitinous plating that gleamed like polished obsidian, Zektar had broken over 200 prisoners during his career. His species evolved on a world where mercy was extinction, and his reputation preceded him across 17 star systems. The human, by contrast, looked unremarkable, medium height, brown hair, and those strange single-pupiled eyes that seemed to look right through him. Subject exhibits unusual calm. Zektar noted into his recorder, his mandibles clicking with each word. No signs of fear response, despite knowledge of destination. To his left, Sergeant Eyehole of the Nexery Collective shifted her serpentine coils, her scales changing from deep blue to agitated purple. Where Zektar relied on brute force and intimidation, Eyehole was an artist of psychological manipulation. Her people possessed natural telepathic abilities that allowed them to sense and exploit emotional vulnerabilities. She had reduced hardened war criminals to sobbing children with nothing but carefully chosen words and mental pressure. But when she probed the human's mind, she found something that made her recoil. "There's something wrong with this one," she hissed, her forked tongue tasting the air nervously. His mind, it's like trying to read static. "I can sense thoughts, but they're layered, compartmentalized." "How is that possible?" The 3rd guard, Captain Mordun of the Crystalline Hegemony, remained motionless in the corner. His silicon-based form resembled a walking mountain of living gemstone, each facet refracting light in hypnotic patterns. Mordun's people were renowned for their absolute logic and emotional detachment. They could analyze behavioral patterns with mathematical precision and had never encountered a puzzle they couldn't solve. The human designation, Marcus Chun, presents interesting variables, Mordun stated in his resonant, crystalline voice. Background indicates standard human physiology, yet preliminary observations suggest adaptation mechanisms beyond species norms. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm and conversational. "You know, I've read about all 3 of your species. Fascinating evolutionary paths you've taken." The casualness of his tone sent ripples of unease through the transport. Prisoners didn't make small talk with their captors. They certainly didn't sound like they were discussing the weather before torture. Zektar's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of agitation among his kind. "You will have ample time to discuss evolution when we reach the Crucible, human. I suggest you use these moments to prepare yourself mentally. Very few emerge from our sessions with their sanity intact. Your interrogation techniques are indeed legendary," Marcus continued, as if Zektar hadn't spoken. The Velthani method of systematic intimidation followed by escalating physical punishment. Quite effective on species that operate primarily on fear responses. Eye-hole scales shifted to a darker purple. How did the human know their specific methodologies? That information was classified at the highest levels. And Sergeant Eyehole, Marcus turned his attention to her. Your psychological warfare techniques have a 93% success rate. Impressive, considering the diversity of mind types you encounter. Stop talking, Eyehole commanded, but her voice carried an uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Captain Mordun represents perhaps the most interesting approach, Marcus continued, seemingly unaffected by Eyehole's mental pressure. Pure logical deconstruction. Break down the prisoner's worldview piece by piece until they have nothing left to hold on to except the truth you want to hear. Mordun's crystalline form shifted slightly, the equivalent of a flinch for his species. How do you possess this knowledge? Marcus smiled, and something in that expression made all three guards simultaneously step back. Because I've been studying you for a very long time. Did you really think your capture of me was your idea? The transport shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and through the viewports, the Crucible came into view. The massive space station hung in the void like a mechanical spider, its dark metal arms reaching out into empty space. For 3,000 years, it had served as the galaxy's most feared interrogation facility. Ships arrived regularly, but prisoners rarely left. The docking bay doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, and the familiar sounds of the Crucible filled the air. The distant hum of machinery, the echo of footsteps on metal gratings, and underneath it all, a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate in the bones of every living thing aboard. As the transport settled onto its assigned pad, dozens of technicians and guards emerged to process the new arrival. The Crucible operated with ruthless efficiency. Prisoners were sorted, cataloged, and assigned to interrogation blocks within hours of arrival. There was no time for adjustment, no opportunity to prepare. The psychological impact of the transition from freedom to captivity was considered part of the softening process. Marcus stood as his restraints were checked and verified. Around him, the three elite guards maintained their professional demeanor, but each was troubled by the human's behavior during transit. Prisoners were supposed to be afraid. Fear made them predictable, manageable. This human showed no fear, only a disturbing confidence that suggested he knew something they didn't. Prisoner transfer authorized, announced the facility's AI in its emotionless monotone. Subject designation, Human Marcus Chun. Assignment, Block 7, Maximum Security. Interrogation Team, Commander Zektar, Sergeant Eyehole, Captain Mordun. Session commencement, immediate. As they escorted Marcus through the station's corridors, he took note of everything. The guard rotations, the security cameras, the ventilation systems, the subtle were patterns on the floor that indicated heavy traffic routes. To his escorts, he appeared to be gawking like any newcomer might. In reality, he was mapping the facility with the precision of someone who had studied its blueprints for months. The corridors of the Crucible were designed to intimidate. The walls were smooth, featureless metal that seemed to absorb sound and light. The lighting was harsh and white, creating sharp shadows that played tricks on the mind. The air circulation system produced a constant, almost subliminal humming that many species found deeply unsettling. Every aspect of the environment was calculated to erode a prisoner's psychological defenses before the actual interrogation began. They passed other prisoners being transported to their sessions, a variety of species, all showing signs of the stress and fear that the Crucible was designed to induce. Some sobbed openly, others maintained stoic silence, but all displayed the body language of beings who knew they were walking toward pain and suffering. Marcus walked among them with the casual stride of someone taking an evening stroll. Block 7 was reserved for the most dangerous prisoners and the most sensitive interrogations. The security here was absolute. Energy barriers, armed guards, and surveillance systems that could detect the slightest movement or change in biological indicators. The interrogation chamber itself was a sterile white room with no windows, no decoration, and no comfort of any kind. A single chair sat in the center, surrounded by an array of devices whose purposes range from the medical to the horrific. As the chamber doors sealed behind them with a finality that had broken countless spirits, Zektar positioned himself directly in front of Marcus while Ihol and Mordun took flanking positions. The arrangement was tactical, psychological, and had been refined through centuries of successful interrogations. "Now we begin," Zektar announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You will tell us everything about the human resistance movement known as the Terra Liberation Front. You will provide names, locations, operational plans, and command structures. You will do this because the alternative is pain beyond your comprehension." Marcus looked around the chamber with genuine curiosity, as if seeing it for the first time despite having studied its layout in classified documents for months. This is impressive work. The psychological impact of the environment, the positioning, even the way you phrase your demands. You've really perfected this process. Your compliance is not optional. Ihol interjected, her mental pressure increasing as she attempted to overwhelm Marcus with projected fear and despair. "I can make you experience every nightmare you've ever had simultaneously. I can make you feel the death of everyone you've ever cared about." Marcus tilted his head thoughtfully. "Interesting approach, but I should mention something that might affect your strategy." "What?" Mordun asked, his logical mind always seeking new information. Marcus's smile returned, wider this time. "I volunteered for this." The silence that followed was absolute. In 3,000 years of operation, the Crucible had never had a volunteer. Prisoners were captured, betrayed, or surrendered, but they never came willingly. The entire psychological framework of the facility was built on the assumption that prisoners wanted to leave, wanted to avoid pain, wanted to survive. "That's impossible," Zektar said, but his mandibles had stopped clicking entirely, a sign of complete bewilderment. "I spent 2 years getting myself into a position where you would consider me valuable enough to bring here." Marcus continued conversationally. "Do you want to know why?" Before any of the 3 guards could respond, Marcus answered his own question. "Because I'm not here to be broken. I'm here to break you." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the implications of his words sank in. For the first time in their careers, the 3 most elite interrogators in the galaxy found themselves wondering if they were the hunters or the hunted. Marcus settled back in the interrogation chair, as if it were the most comfortable seat in the universe. "Shall we begin?" The first session lasted 18 hours. By standard Crucible protocols, most prisoners would have broken within the first 6. The combination of Zektar's physical intimidation, Ihol's psychological warfare, and Mordun's logical deconstruction had proven effective against every species in the galaxy. The 3 had worked together for over a decade, their methods synchronized to exploit the weaknesses inherent in all known forms of intelligent life. Marcus Chun proved to be unlike anything they had encountered. When Zektar attempted to establish dominance through physical presence, towering over Marcus while describing in graphic detail what would happen to him, the human listened with the attention of a student taking notes. He asked clarifying questions about Velthani anatomy, seemed genuinely interested in the evolutionary advantages of Zektar's natural armor plating, and even complimented the effectiveness of his species' intimidation displays. "Your pheromone secretions are fascinating," Marcus said during hour 3, while Zektar loomed over him with murderous intent. "The chemical composition is designed to trigger fear responses in most oxygen-breathing species. It's actually quite sophisticated, a cocktail of compounds that bypass conscious thought and trigger primal terror. My species doesn't have the receptors for most of them, though. Evolution, you understand." Zektar's mandibles clicked in frustration. Fear was his primary weapon, and this human seemed immune to it. When intimidation failed, he moved to the next phase, control violence. A few well-placed strikes to demonstrate the reality of the situation, the promise of escalation if cooperation wasn't forthcoming. Marcus absorbed the blows without crying out, though Zektar's strength was enough to shatter most humanoid bones. Instead, he used the opportunity to study his captor's fighting style, noting the tells that preceded each strike, the slight shifts in balance that indicated which direction the next attack would come from. "You favor your left side," Marcus observed after taking a particularly vicious hit to the ribs. "Old injury? The way you compensate suggests damage to your rear left leg joint. Battle wound, perhaps?" The observation was so accurate that Zektar actually stepped back. How could the human have analyzed his movement patterns while being beaten? Ihole took over during Hour 7, weaving her mental influences through the session like a spider spinning a web. She projected images of Marcus's worst memories, amplifying every moment of loss, pain, and failure from his past. She made him relive the death of his parents in a shuttle accident, the betrayal of a lover, the failure of a mission that had cost innocent lives. But instead of breaking down, Marcus became more analytical. "You're pulling those from my surface memories," he said, even as tears from relived trauma ran down his cheeks. But memory isn't just stored in one place in a human brain. We have redundant systems, emotional associations, even false memories that our minds create to protect us from trauma. It's actually a survival mechanism. Our brains literally edit our experiences to make them bearable. Ihole intensified her assault, diving deeper into his psyche. But she found herself encountering resistance she had never experienced before. Human minds, she discovered, were far more compartmentalized than she had anticipated. Where other species had mental landscapes that could be easily navigated and manipulated, Marcus's mind was like a fortress with hidden passages, false floors, and rooms that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. "How are you doing this?" she hissed, her scales shifting through confused patterns of color. "Meditation training," Marcus replied calmly, though his body was still trembling from the psychological assault. Humans have been developing mental discipline techniques for thousands of years. We call it mindfulness, the ability to observe our own thoughts without being controlled by them. Pain is just information, fear is just a chemical reaction, and memories are just patterns of neural activity. By the time Mordun began his logical deconstruction in Hour 12, both of his colleagues were visibly shaken. The crystalline being's approach was different. Instead of attacking the emotions or the body, he attacked the very foundations of what Marcus believed about reality. "Your resistance is illogical," Mordun stated with mathematical precision. "You will be tortured. You will eventually provide the information we seek. This is statistical certainty based on 3,000 years of data. Continued resistance only increases your suffering without changing the outcome." "Interesting premise," Marcus replied, settling into what appeared to be a philosophical discussion. "But your statistics are based on the assumption that my primary goal is to avoid suffering. What if it isn't? All biological entities seek to minimize pain and maximize survival probability," Mordun countered. "This is fundamental to evolutionary success." "True, but humans have this peculiar trait called purpose. Sometimes we're willing to endure tremendous suffering in service of a goal that transcends our individual survival. We call it sacrifice, and it's been baffling logical species for centuries." Mordun's crystalline form shifted as he processed this information. The concept of deliberately accepting negative outcomes for abstract reasons ran counter to everything his species understood about rational behavior. "What purpose could justify your suffering here?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time there was something predatory in the expression. "To prove a point." As the 18th hour concluded, the three elite guards found themselves more exhausted than their prisoner. They had thrown everything in their considerable arsenal at this human, and he had not only endured but seemed to be enjoying himself. Worse, he was clearly studying them, learning their methods, analyzing their weaknesses with the same clinical detachment they usually reserve for their victims. During the break between sessions, they met in the observation chamber adjacent to the interrogation room. Through the one-way barrier, they could see Marcus sitting calmly in his chair, apparently meditation. "This is unprecedented," Zektar admitted, his usual confidence shaken. "He shows no signs of breaking. If anything, he seems to be getting stronger." Eye-hole coiled nervously, her scales cycling through agitated patterns. His mind is unlike anything I've encountered. He's not just resisting my influence, he's studying it, learning from it. I can feel him mapping the structure of my mental attacks. Mordun remained silent for several moments, processing the variables of their situation with crystal clarity. I believe we are not the subjects of an interrogation, he finally announced. We are the objects of an experiment. What do you mean? Sektar demanded. Consider the evidence. The human volunteered for capture. He possesses detailed knowledge of our methods and backgrounds. He shows no fear or desire to escape, but instead demonstrates scientific curiosity about our techniques. Conclusion: Marcus Chun is not here to have information extracted. He is here to extract information from us. The implications of this revelation hit them like a physical blow. For their entire careers, they have been the predators, the ones in control, the ones who held all the power in the dynamic. The possibility that they might be the ones being hunted was so alien to their experience that it was difficult to process. But what could he possibly learn from us that would justify this? Eye-hole asked. Before anyone could answer, Marcus's voice came through the intercom system. Somehow, he had activated the communication link from inside the supposedly isolated interrogation chamber. You're wondering what I'm really after? His voice was conversational, almost friendly. The truth is, I needed to understand how the galaxy's best interrogators think, how they operate, how they break people. Not because I wanted to resist you, though that's been an interesting challenge, but because I need to know how to do what you do. The three guards stared at the human through the barrier. He was looking directly at the observation window, though it was supposed to be impossible to see through from his side. You see, gentlemen and lady, humanity is about to enter a new phase of galactic relations. We've been the new kids on the block for a while now, trying to find our place among species that have been spacefaring for millennia. We've been diplomatic, cautious, eager to please. Marcus stood and walked to the center of the room, his movements casual, but somehow commanding attention. But recent events have shown us that diplomacy has its limits. Some species only respect strength. Some cultures only understand dominance. And sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become very, very good at breaking the things that threaten it. He gestured toward the observation window with a smile that made all three guards step back involuntarily. The Terra Liberation Front isn't a resistance movement. It's a training program. Every human who gets captured is actually a volunteer gathering intelligence on alien interrogation techniques, military capabilities, and psychological weaknesses. You've been teaching us how to think like predators instead of prey. Zektar's mandibles began clicking rapidly, the Velthani equivalent of hyperventilation. The prisoners we've interrogated, how many were volunteers? Over the past 2 years? All of them. Every single human who passed through this facility was gathering data for the advancement of human intelligence operations. We've been studying your entire species' psychological profiles, learning your fears, your pressure points, your cultural blind spots. Marcus moved to the wall, where he somehow activated a hidden panel, revealing surveillance equipment that shouldn't have existed in the interrogation chamber. For instance, Zektar, your entire species suffers from a psychological condition humans would call imposter syndrome. For all your intimidating appearance and cultural emphasis on strength, Velthani are deeply insecure about their place in the galactic hierarchy. You constantly fear that other species see you as primitive brutes. Zektar's chitinous plating actually changed color, a stress response a species thought was undetectable to other races. Sergeant Eyehole, the Nexury Collective's telepathic abilities come with a terrible cost. You're constantly bombarded with the emotional states of everyone around you. Your species is one of the highest suicide rates in the galaxy because you literally can't escape the pain and fear you inflict on others. It's why you chose this profession. Surrounding yourself with emotions you create gives you a sense of control over the chaos in your mind. Eyehole's scales had gone completely white, the Nexury equivalent of shock. And Captain Mordun, Your people's obsession with logic stems from existential terror. A race of living crystals in a universe of organic chaos, desperately trying to prove that order and reason can triumph over entropy and death. You chose interrogation because breaking down other beings' belief systems makes you feel like you're imposing order on chaos. Mordunn's crystalline form had begun vibrating at a frequency that indicated severe distress among his species. Marcus returned to his chair with the satisfied air of someone who had just completed a successful presentation. The really beautiful part is that this session has been broadcast live to human intelligence centers across 3-star systems. We now have detailed recordings of exactly how the galaxy's most elite interrogators react when they discover they've been manipulated. This data will be invaluable for future operations. He leaned back in the chair and smiled at the stunned silence from the observation chamber. I believe it's my turn to ask the questions now. Shall we begin session 2? The second session began 22 hours later, but the power dynamic had shifted completely. The 3 elite guards entered the interrogation chamber like condemned prisoners walking to their execution, while Marcus greeted them with the warm enthusiasm of a professor welcoming students to an advanced seminar. I trust you've had time to process yesterday's revelations, Marcus said, settling comfortably into what had once been his restraint chair. The quantum bindings that had held him were now neatly arranged on a side table. He had somehow released himself hours ago, though none of the security systems had detected his escape. I imagine it's quite a shock to discover that you've been the subjects of study rather than the conductors of it. Zektar remained standing near the door, his usual aggressive posturing replaced by something resembling wariness. The revelation that his species' psychological weaknesses had been cataloged and analyzed had shaken him more deeply than any physical wound. For a race that prided itself on strength and intimidation, being seen as insecure and predictable was almost unbearable. Eyehole had coiled herself into the corner furthest from Marcus, her scales a mottled pattern of gray and brown that indicated severe emotional distress. The human's casual dissection of her people's mental anguish had forced her to confront truths about herself that she had spent decades avoiding. Worse, she could feel his emotional state, a calm, analytical satisfaction that felt almost predatory in its intensity. Mordun stood motionless in the center of the room, his crystalline form cycling through complex geometric patterns as he attempted to process the logical implications of their situation. For a being whose entire worldview was built on rational analysis and predictable outcomes, discovering that he had been manipulated by variables he hadn't even known existed was fundamentally devastating. "You seem upset," Marcus observed with genuine concern. "I understand this must be difficult. Having your entire professional identity challenged, learning that your methods are not just known, but have been turned against you. It's quite a psychological shock." "What do you want?" Zektar asked, his voice lacking its usual authoritative boom. "Excellent question. What I want is to understand exactly how far this galaxy is willing to go to maintain its current power structure. You see, humanity has been patient. We've followed the rules, respected the established order, tried to find our place in galactic society through diplomacy and cooperation." Marcus stood and began pacing the room with casual authority, as if he were the one conducting the interrogation. "But we've noticed some disturbing patterns. Human colonies that try to establish independent trade agreements mysteriously suffer equipment failures. Human research stations that make breakthrough discoveries find themselves under investigation for safety violations. Human representatives to galactic councils are consistently assigned to low-priority committees despite our technological contributions." He stopped directly in front of Zektar, looking up at the towering alien with complete fearlessness. Someone is working very hard to keep humanity in a subordinate position. Someone with influence across multiple species, access to advanced technology, and the ability to coordinate actions across vast distances. Someone who sees humanity not as a potential partner, but as a threat to be managed. "These are serious accusations," Mordun said, his logical mind automatically analyzing the implications. Do you have evidence of this conspiracy? Marcus smiled. I'm looking at 3 pieces of evidence right now. You represent the military might of the Velthani Empire, the psychological warfare capabilities of the Nexri Collective, and the technological superiority of the crystalline hegemony. 3 of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, working together in perfect coordination. That doesn't happen by accident. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, the 3 guards were forced to confront the possibility that their cooperation wasn't just professional efficiency, but part of a larger agenda they hadn't fully understood. Our assignment to work together was presented as an honor, Ihole said slowly, her mental abilities picking up the uncertainty radiating from her colleagues. The 3 best interrogators from 3 allied species, combining our methods for maximum effectiveness. And who made that assignment? Marcus asked gently. The question hung in the air like a toxin. None of them could remember exactly who had initiated their partnership. The orders had come down through their respective chains of command, presented as routine reassignment. But now that they thought about it, the timing had been suspiciously coordinated. This is speculation, Zektar protested, but his mandibles were clicking in a pattern that suggested deep uncertainty. Is it? Let me share some interesting data points that human intelligence has gathered over the past 2 years. Marcus activated a wall display that shouldn't have responded to his touch, revealing a complex network diagram that made all 3 guards step back in shock. The Crucible's operational budget comes from 17 different sources across 12 species. But if you trace the financial flows back far enough, they all originate from the same shadow organization, an entity that has been quietly steering galactic politics for over 4 centuries. The display shifted, showing shipping records, communication intercepts, and financial transactions that painted a picture of vast manipulation. They call themselves the Custodians, and their goal is simple: maintain the current galactic order at all costs. No new species is allowed to rise too quickly. No single race can dominate others, and absolutely no one is permitted to develop technologies or capabilities that might upset the balance of power. Mordun's crystalline form was vibrating at an increasingly high frequency as he processed the information. If this data is accurate, then our entire careers have been in service to an organization we didn't know existed. Worse than that, Marcus continued, you've been unwitting agents in the systematic oppression of any species that shows potential for rapid advancement. The prisoners you've broken weren't just criminals or terrorists. Many of them were scientists, explorers, innovators whose only crime was being too successful for the Custodians' comfort. He pulled up another display showing detailed records of their past interrogations, but now with additional context that reframed everything they thought they knew about their work. Dr. Kelvin of the Meridian Republic. You broke him for information about illegal weapons research. What you weren't told was that he had developed a new form of clean energy that could have revolutionized space travel. His research was confiscated and buried. Ihole's scales were cycling through rapid color changes as memories of that interrogation came flooding back. She remembered the Meridian scientist's passionate defense of his work, his insistence that he was trying to help his people, his genuine confusion about why he was being treated as a criminal. Explorer Captain Vextari of the Freelance Navigation Guild, interrogated for violating quarantine protocols. Her actual crime was discovering a hyperspace route that would have cut travel time between the Outer Rim and core worlds by 60%. The route was classified, and her crew was reassigned to different sectors. Zektar's memory of that session was vivid. The captain had been brave, defiant, insisting that her discovery could benefit everyone. He had broken her will through systematic intimidation, never questioning why a simple navigation protocol violation required such extreme measures. And Professor Quildan of the Academic Consortium, supposedly guilty of sharing classified research with unauthorized parties. In reality, he had developed breakthrough medical treatments that could have saved millions of lives across dozens of species. His research data was seized, and He was discredited professionally. Mordunn's perfect memory was replaying every detail of that interrogation with new understanding. The professor's logical arguments, his statistical evidence of the potential benefits of his work, his mathematical proof that suppressing his research would lead to preventable deaths, all of it dismissed as the desperate lies of a criminal. Marcus turned off the display and looked at the three guards with something approaching sympathy. For decades, you've been the sword arm of an organization that sees every form of progress as a potential threat. You've been breaking heroes and calling them villains, destroying hope and calling it justice. The weight of this revelation settled over them like a physical force. Each guard was forced to confront the possibility that their entire professional lives have been built on a lie, that their skills and dedication have been weaponized against innocent people. "Why are you telling us this?" Zektar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because humanity needs allies," Marcus replied. "And because I believe that given the choice between serving a shadow organization that manipulates you and standing for something genuine, you'll make the right decision." He walked to the wall where the hidden surveillance equipment was concealed and began activating systems that shouldn't have existed. This facility has been recording everything for the custodians, not just prisoner interrogations, but guard conversations, personal communications, even biometric data on emotional responses. You haven't just been working for them. You've been specimens in their ongoing study of how to control and manipulate the galaxy's most effective enforcers. The displays around the room came to life, showing years of secretly recorded footage. The three guards watched themselves in private moments, their conversations analyzed and cataloged, their personal weaknesses identified, and filed away for future exploitation. "They know everything about you," Marcus continued. "Your fears, your desires, your pressure points, your family connections. They've been building psychological profiles on you, just like you build them on prisoners. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Ihole finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion that she couldn't hide from her telepathic companions. "They used us. They made us into monsters and convinced us we were heroes." "Not monsters," Marcus corrected gently. "Weapons. Very sophisticated, very effective weapons in the hands of people who understand exactly how to aim you at targets and pull your triggers." He moved to stand in the center of the room, equidistant from all three guards, his posture open and non-threatening despite the psychological bombs he had just detonated. But weapons can choose new targets. Elite guards can become elite protectors. The skills you've developed in service to oppression can be redirected toward liberation. Mordunn's logical mind was working through the implications with crystal clarity. "You're proposing we betray our oaths, abandon our positions, and join a human resistance movement based on information that could be fabricated." "I'm proposing you honor your oaths," Marcus replied. "Your real oaths to serve justice, protect the innocent, and maintain order. The custodians have perverted those principles into tools of oppression. I'm offering you a chance to remember what you originally swore to defend." The three guards stood in contemplative silence, each processing the revelations in their own way. The foundations of their understanding had been shattered, their certainties turned to dust, their professional pride transformed into shame. But underneath the shock and betrayal, something else was stirring. The same drive for justice that had originally led them to careers in law enforcement, the same desire to protect the innocent that had made them elite guards in the first place. Marcus could see the change beginning in their postures, their breathing patterns, their unconscious microexpressions. The hunters were remembering what it felt like to be protectors. "What exactly are you asking of us?" Zektar said finally. Marcus smiled, but this time it wasn't predatory or analytical. It was the smile of someone offering hope to people who had forgotten what it looked like. "I'm asking you to help me break something that has never been broken before. The most secure facility in the galaxy. The place where the custodians keep all their most sensitive information, their operational plans, their list of assets, and targets." He paused, letting the implications sink in. I'm asking you to help me break into the custodian archive itself.